spent over a decade looking for the right diagnostic labels to fit my brain. I received several misdiagnoses before realizing I was ADHD, and even then, I was dismissed by several professionals when I tried to address it. I've had a really complicated relationship with mental health labels over the years. At some points in my life, I've thought, the right label is gonna save me. And at other points in my life, labels have felt like a prison. So what's the truth? Do we need labels? What can they actually do for us? Let's talk about it. If you're new here, hi, hello, my name is Megan. I am autistic and ADHD, and I am a mental health advocate, content creator, and life coach. So let's start with the point of view that admittedly I have definitely held for longer and more often throughout my life, which is that labels can save me. So let's just start with what did I think labels were gonna save me from? First up, there's shame. I really thought that if I had the right label, then I would no longer feel ashamed of my brain or ashamed of who I was as a person. Next up is distress. With my mental health, I experience a lot of distress. For me, it feels like my atoms are splitting and ripping apart and I am disintegrating inside. That's what it feels like. Distress is very, very, very uncomfortable, and I wanted to be saved from that. And finally, I thought a label might save me from loneliness, because I thought if I found the right label, I would automatically find a community of people who share that label, and then I wouldn't be so alone with my struggles anymore. As you can see, I had a lot of incentive to believe that labels could save me because I was struggling so much. I was looking for anything to save me, and I guess I just clung on to the idea of labels as being the answer. This isn't entirely my fault, by the way. I think this is really what the pathological paradigm is set up to teach us. The pathological paradigm of mental health basically says that you either have a normal brain or you have a brain that is disordered, and that the goal when you have a disordered brain is always to get back to having a normal brain, or as close to it as is achievable for you. And in some cases, I actually kind of understand this. Like with my depression, the goal is not to like embrace my depression and just be okay with it. The goal is to be less depressed. But with other aspects of my mental health, the pathological paradigm just doesn't really fit. For example, with my autism and ADHD, I don't see myself as deviating from a normal brain. I see myself as deviating from the concept of neuronormativity, which is the idea that there is a normal brain to even deviate from. And that might sound like splitting hairs, but I think it's actually really important. So let's dig into that for just a minute. Neuronormativity says that there is a normal brain and there are disordered brains, and that they are completely separate and different. When in reality, I don't know that a normal brain actually exists. I think as a society, we have an expectation of what a normal brain is, but that's largely informed by like white supremacy and capitalism rather than by like biology. My brain, with its autism and ADHD, is not other from some like perfect normal. It's other from the expectation of a perfect normal. If all of that was confusing or strange, I really recommend you read this book, We're All Neurodiverse by Sonny Jane Wise. It will absolutely explain this in more detail and with better clarity. I'll put the link to this in the description. In addition to all of this struggle with the pathology paradigm, I also was really struggling with a lot of black and white thinking. In my head, either there was the perfect correct label that explained everything about me and made all of my behavior and distress and shame make sense, or nothing was wrong with me and I was just a dramatic crybaby. If I couldn't find the right label, then that meant there was something wrong with me as a person, not just something biologically wrong with my brain. And I know this is a really extreme way of thinking, and at the end of the day, it turned out to be pretty unhelpful for me, but I do think that there is some truth in here and that labels can actually be really helpful. My favorite way of explaining this is an analogy about a fever. Let's say you wake up one morning with a fever. You need to know how to treat that fever, but you can't know how to effectively treat it if you don't know why it's there. Like, sure, you can take some Tylenol and that will probably help, but will it help with the underlying cause? Maybe not. If you've just got a viral infection and you kind of have to wait it out, then yeah, Tylenol is the full and complete answer to your problem, probably. But if you have a bacterial infection where you need antibiotics in order to treat it, then Tylenol is only going to mask the problem and it's going to keep getting worse. Or heck, what if you broke a bone and didn't realize and your body's fighting an infection around the break? You really need help with that. In this case, knowing the cause, understanding the label, is gonna make a big difference in how you treat what's going on. This is why I've always had such a problem when people try to tell me,
Megan, don't obsess over the label, just treat the symptoms.
And I'm like, okay, but if I don't know what the symptoms are being caused by, then how do I know if I'm treating them correctly? For example, one of my misdiagnoses for a long time was bipolar, and the bipolar medications never worked for me. We were trying to treat the symptoms, but it wasn't working because I had the incorrect label. Finally, why do labels matter? Well, I think OMG I'm Autistic sums it up really well. I'm gonna go ahead and put this on the screen, but it says, why do you need a label? Because there is comfort in knowing you are a normal zebra, not a strange horse. Because you can't find community with other zebras if you don't know you belong. And because it is impossible for a zebra to be happy or healthy, spending its life feeling like a failed horse. What are you doing? Oh, me? I'm working on a resource roundup for one of my one-on-one clients. What is a resource roundup? It's a really cool collection of Instagram accounts, academic articles, online tests they can take, podcast episode, YouTube channels, and so many more resources that pertain specifically to what we've talked about in our sessions. That actually sounds really helpful. What do you put in a resource roundup? Well, for this particular client, we are primarily focusing on shame and stories we tell ourselves about who we are and how we can tell stories that are more helpful, more honest, and more compassionate to ourselves. That's kind of awesome. Yeah, but I mean, for some of my clients, we focus a lot more on productivity. For other clients, we focus on emotional dysregulation. And for other clients, we focus on interpersonal relationships. It's super, super customizable when you work with me one-on-one. So what should people do if they're watching right now and they want their own resource roundup? They want to work with you. Oh, they can just go to the description and book a discovery call with me. I love meeting with people before I decide to work with them just to make sure we're a good fit. Oh yeah, get back to work and we'll get back to the video. Oh yeah, thanks, okay. So as you can probably tell, I've spent a large portion of my life over-identifying with labels, but I've also had times in my life where I have really, really resented labels, and I want to talk about that too. Sometimes labels feel like a punishment. They don't make me feel seen, they don't make me feel heard, they just make me feel othered, especially when those labels come with a ton of stigma. When I was diagnosed with bipolar, my then boyfriend, now husband, had a lot of complicated feelings about it because there was really only one image given to him of what someone with bipolar looked like. That was somebody completely out of control, someone you can't trust, someone who isn't always themselves. None of which is true, by the way. If you have bipolar, please know that this stigma is so false and so unfair to you. But my boyfriend was 20 at the time and he didn't know any better, and he was afraid of what it meant that I had bipolar. And in that way, that label felt really heavy to me. It felt like a barrier in between me and my loved ones. And unfortunately, there is a lot of truth to this issue with labels. It's not just in my head that I feel burdened by them sometimes. Other people do perceive me differently due to my labels. And this is important to be aware of. We can't just pretend that because we are busy breaking down mental health stigma that the rest of the world is doing that. We need to be aware of what stigma we are likely to face so that we can face it and be prepared and know how to keep ourselves safe. So how do I feel now about labels? I think now I have a much more nuanced view of labels. It's taken me a long time to get here, especially with autism. A lot of times my brain thinks in black and white, yes or no, all or nothing. But if we go back to the fever analogy, I used to think that if you didn't know what was causing the fever, then it was pointless to try to treat it. That's not really true, is it? We can still take the Tylenol while we figure out what's going on. And also, just finding out what's causing the fever isn't enough to make you healthier. You have to take the right medication, reset the bone, do what you need to do. For me, for a long time, I was placing so much emphasis on figuring out what was wrong that it was stopping me from taking action to better my life and to feel better. And finally, something I've realized about mental health diagnoses is that they weren't handed down from on high, from God or something. They're man-made, and we've made bad labels in the past. We're probably making bad labels now, and we'll probably make bad labels in the future. This is not me saying that mental illness isn't real or that it's man-made or whatever. Like, no, that's not the vibe. What I'm saying is that what we call them, what we call struggles with mental health, it's gonna change over the years. And it's okay if you don't fit perfectly into any of the current boxes. Heaven knows I don't. As of right now, I have several official professional diagnoses like autism, ADHD, depression, but I also have some traits and symptoms that fit vague categories that I don't necessarily have a diagnosis for, like trauma or dissociation. And in the past, I would have obsessed over those vague categories, trying to nail down the perfect, exact diagnosis. And yes, there's a huge part of my brain that is still tempted to do that. But I'm learning to accept that maybe I just have traits of trauma and dissociation, and maybe that's like okay. I'm still navigating the world of labels, and I would love to hear in the comments your thoughts about whether labels are helpful or if they're a hindrance or maybe some combination of both. I can't wait to hear what you all have to say, and I will see you next week.